Of Lord Geidt as the Prime Minister's ethics advisor leaves a job opportunity, of course, but also an opportunity for a post to be closed. It is being reported this morning that Downing Street is not exactly scrabbling to find a new advisor after losing two, of course, now to resignations. It might just scrap the post completely. How realistic is that? What are the implications, both ethically and politically as well? Does it really matter to Conservative supporters? John Penrose is on the line, Conservative MP, who was, of course, the Prime Minister's anti-corruption czar until he resigned after saying it was pretty clear that Boris Johnson had broken the ministerial code. Mr. Penrose, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Is it clear to you why Lord Geidt resigned? Because I know the letter, and we've all seen the letter now, which talks about a breach to do with import duties on steel, but that wouldn't seem to be a breach of the ministerial code, would it? Is it clear to you why he's gone?
I'm afraid I know no more than you do from reading the letter, and you're right that the letter leaves a series of big question marks over what exactly it was about this supposed trade problem which caused him to finally tip over the edge. But I think it's also clear from what he says in his letter that this was, if you like, the last straw that broke the camel's back. He'd been getting more and more uncomfortable from what he was saying in his letter. And indeed, the reason which led me to resign it was still clearly rankling with him. He mentioned in his letter that the Prime Minister, in replying to the Sue Gray report about, in terms of how he dealt with the ministerial code of the Partygate, hadn't necessarily answered all the questions which should have been answered. So from what we know, it had been a sort of cumulative thing, and this was just the final straw. But beyond that, we just got the letter, that's it.
Yeah, I suppose the point is, though, that the final straw doesn't seem to be a straw, and there's no obvious reason why it would be a straw, if I can put it like that, because there's no obvious breach of the code, is there? Do we need to know, at least? Do you think we do need to know properly what it was about this steel tariffs business that he thought was in breach of the code?
Well, I think parliamentarians are likely to ask that question next week. I think that's very, very probable. So I think we should expect that to happen. I guess the question is, if the government was to bring forward any measures in this area which look like they were breaking the ministerial code, then that would sort of light a match under the whole thing. But with any luck, if there's been a problem with the code in this area, they'll be trying to find other ways of achieving the same thing in a way which is ethical and within the principles of the code and adheres to the Nolan principles in public life.
There is another slightly vague element to this, and that is what happens to Lord Geidt's previous investigation, which was going to be published, wasn't it, into the refurbishment of the Downing Street flat. How important is it that that is still published, even though Lord Geidt himself has gone?
Well, I think one of the reasons why it's important to have some continuity, why it's important to have, if not a precise replacement, then an effective succession here, is to make sure that you don't leave really quite damaging questions dangling, and that anything that's outstanding doesn't just get forgotten and lost.
So it needs to be published, that full report.
I don't know how complete it is, and I don't know whether or not that's there's anything that still remains to be done on it, or whether or not it's just sitting on a shelf and waiting to be published. But I think the important thing with all these issues is they don't go away if you just ignore them. Ethics and integrity doesn't work like that, and therefore they will have to put this stuff to bed. The only way to draw a line under these things, frankly, is to get out in the open, and then people can understand and move on.
Or if you're in Downing Street, perhaps to do the opposite. Don't publish anything, and crucially, when it comes to replacing Lord Geidt, don't do it.
Well, I think that would be potentially quite a big mistake. I mean, the point here is that you can obviously, and if they felt it was sensible, it might be useful to look at it. You can obviously change the role a bit, but you shouldn't be weakening the role. If you're going to come up with a revised version as a successor to Lord Geidt, some new format, some new way of dealing with the issue, that's all fine. But it should be a question of how, not if. You can't just pretend that it doesn't matter and that there's no job to be done. So by all means, change the parameters, but I don't think you can weaken it. And particularly at the moment, I just think that the Prime Minister is currently overdrawn, if I can put it that way, on his account with both the voters and with the parliamentary party. They need to show that there's a that they're serious about this. This is part of the reset, I would argue, which the Prime Minister has rightly said he wants to do after last week's vote of no confidence. Good for him. This would be a good way of being part of that and moving it forward.
But of course he won his vote, didn't he? He won his confidence vote. He might feel the opposite, actually, that the time now is to put these things in the background and to concentrate on other things. And there's no obvious pressure on him to do what you're suggesting.
Well, I don't see it that way at all. I mean, the point is that he won the vote of confidence last week. You're absolutely right. And that rightly means I hope everybody else needs to both accept that result and respect that result. And what it's done is it's bought him a bit of time. It's bought him an opportunity to have the reset that he says he wants to do, to rebuild some bridges with the reasonably large proportion of the parliamentary party who voted against him. And I hope he's going to use that right. He said he wants to. He said he wants to have this reset. And the difficulty, as I said, with issues about honesty, integrity, and so forth, is they don't go away if you just ignore them. So I think he needs to use the time to address this, to sort it out, and to show that he's serious about this. And if he does, that could be a really important part of the reset. So I hope he'll use the time that he's won effectively.
John Penrose, thank you very much for talking to us this morning.
27 minutes.